Okay. Okay. Okay, so my goal today is to at least finish these two lambs, put them all together. I have all the pieces for them. Oops, missing one of those. But that's over here somewhere. Oh, it should be. Yes. So I've got all my pieces parts pretty much made already. Anything that I could make on the embroidery machine already, I have. So they're just good to go, ready to be sewn together. I pre-made a bunch of them because I can make that a lot faster. So I can make more lambs overall and at a slightly cheaper price just because I'm not I charge by my time. So if I can cut down on the time, I can lower my prices and still not work for less than minimum wage. So my goal today is to put together this lamb. This one's going to have a magnet in it. This one is almost done. I just have a couple pieces that need to be put back together. And that one does not have a magnet in the head, so I was able to put the head together already and stuff it. So I'm going to get this lamb to the same point as this one, and then this one has a lot of hand sewing left to do. I don't think there's anything more to do on the machine for that one, so it's going to be a lot of hand sewing right away. So hopefully that means my microphone's going to work a little bit better today than it did yesterday. But we will see as we go along. I also maybe have a chat box that functions. I don't actually know, but I tried setting that up last night, and I've got a follower alert that should also work. I don't have raids or anything like that yet. I didn't want to do a lot of work and then find out none of them worked, so I just did the follower and the chat box, and I will see after today, hopefully, that they are both working or broken, and then I can work from there to either troubleshoot or to create the next alert. Oh, ears. So I didn't have this fabric pre-cut out just because I do the face on the embroidery first. So right there. And then I need to have that extra just in case the face isn't fully centered or something on the face, on the piece here. I wouldn't want it to be like completely off center in there, or like off the edge. So I don't cut out the front of the face until after the embroidery is on it. But everything else is cut out, so we should be good. There's not too much machine sewing left. I have to cut out the face and then sew the face and the back together. And then the body needs to be sewn together after I get the arms into it. The base of the feet go onto the legs. The ears need to be stitched in. Beyond that, the little fuzzy for the top of the face, the horns, those will all be machine sewn. I need to do some hand sewing on the magnetic hat before I do the machine sewing on it. So yeah, not much to do right now with the machine. A lot of that's just going to be on my table today. Okay. Let me move those guys out of the way. go. That will be where the neck attaches to the body there. And because this fabric is so stretchy, I actually cut it very like smaller than what it needs to be, because it is going to stretch like crazy to become a much larger hole. Okay, so that's cut out. That is the same shape and size as the back of the head. It is just the two bits in order to give it that kind of three-dimensional shape rather than just being flat like a pillow. I do have these notches that I cut out here. Those are called darts. Essentially, you cut out the fabric and then you just sew them together to kind of make a box point. So I'm going to go and put all the darts together on these and then sew the front and back together. The darts I don't need to pin together. The face to the back I will. So I'm going to just take these guys over right now and get all those darts finished up. Oh, and I'll put some interesting stuff on the table. Yeah. Ha. Okay. So that's the first part with the darts done. I'm going to do the face. Okay. So those are the darts on the face done. Now normally what I would do is I just sit and put this in my lap and pin it together right there in front of the machine, but because I'm streaming, I'm going to try and do stuff actually on camera now. So I'm coming back over to my table. What I've got here are these little tiny red clips. They work the same as pins, but they hold thicker fabric and the edge of fabric a little bit better. You don't have to work the pins through the fabric as much. So I use this on the really thick fabrics like this Sherpa here. And I'm just tucking all the fluff inside as I pin it. Otherwise, it all sticks out and you get kind of a flat edge right at the seam there where all the fluff is like missing. So if you just tuck it inside a little bit better, you get a fluffier edge. Okay. And I'm skipping the part where the ear goes because I'm going to tuck an ear in there afterwards. Let's see. Okay. And then I just want to make sure that the darts on either side match up. It's not as important on this Sherpa because everything gets lost in the fluff, but if I was doing a little bit thinner material like my minky or cotton, you really do want those lines to line up just so that they come together at like a point. And again, I'm skipping a spot to put the ear in. And oops, those don't line up at all. Okay. A little bit better there. And there we go. Okay, so those edges are all together. Now I'm going to put the ears in. The ears are also sewn on my embroidery machine, and then I just cut around them. And then I get to tuck them in to the face there. So my machine doesn't do all the work, just most of it. Yellow pins. So the ears get folded to give it that little ear look. I'm using the yellow pin, which is a little bit thicker pin, just to give it a point to turn around. So I know that that pin should be right up in the corner there. And then my blue pin is what's going to actually hold the ear together as I put it into the lamb. I'm not going to have the yellow pin in there. That is going to be taken out before I sew over it. You should never sew over any pins, but I sew over my blue ones all the time because they are okay. If they get hit by the needle, they just bend out of the way. It's not going to hurt the machine as much as sewing over one of the thicker yellow pins would. So now that I've gotten it all together, this is the part that I constantly mess up on when making stuffed animals and plushies. When you put the ears in, you have to make sure they're going the right direction. Otherwise, you might end up with a face with backwards ears. I run into that all the time. So it has to be that the ear folds over, the front of the ear folds over onto the front of the face. So I'm going to make sure that it goes in like this so that the front of the ear will be touching that face inside there. And then for this ear, it's going to be this way. Raw edge. Oh, fuzzies. Getting rid of the fuzzies. Okay, it's going to be this way. So I'm going to want to fold it over there so that I have two backwards ears, or two ears that match. I don't want to have two of the same ear. So again, I'm going to use my yellow pin as my pivot point. Got my mark from the embroidery machine where I pivot on. There we go. So that's going to be my pivot point. I'll fold it right there. Just make sure that's all the way up and in. There we go. And then my blue pins to hold it together while I sew it. And there we go. And that ear is going to go in this side so that again it is touching the face. And they do go inside, you don't sew them onto the outside like this, because then when you flip it, they will actually be inside the plushie. So everything goes inside the seams. Nothing should be sticking out other than the seam allowance. So I'm going to tuck that little guy right in there. And then I've got a couple little yellow marks just from where I traced out the face. So they're going to get 2 more blue pins. Just so that they line up there. And I'm going to put a little clip just to hold the ear to the underside as well. So there we go, that first ear's in. And same as the other side, I'm just pinning it in place right in between my little yellow marks. Then bringing up the back of the fabric to match. And there we go. Okay, so now I'm ready to take that back over to my machine and stitch all the way around. I'm gonna take those with me so I can put them away. Okay. So that's all sewn together now. I did sew around once and then go back, and there were a couple of places where my threads got a little bit close to the edge on the underside. So I just went through and I fixed that with the second line around. So just to make sure there's no holes in there. Now that's the face, but before I flip it back inside out, this one is actually going to have a magnet in it. So I'm going to be drawing a line up to center the magnet in the top there. Okay, so center of the mouth all the way up to the top. That's going to be right about there on both sides. That's where I want the magnet to sit. I don't want the magnet off center in either direction. For the crown, because it is a little bit larger and I want to make sure that it stays in place, I do have larger magnets for it. These are just the neodymium. They're super strong little magnets. So I've got one for the crown and then one for the head. And then I just need some fabric because I'm going to actually put it in place so that it doesn't move from where I put it. Okay, this is just cotton. It's literally nothing special. This is a muslin that I use for scrap bits when I need it. So I can just slice off a little bit, and this is where the magnet's going to sit to hold it in place. There we go. I'll need this again when I get back to the crown magnet, but for now it needs to be out of my way because I've got limited space. Okay. Let me see. I might actually not need extra there. I might use that for the crown. Yeah, that's a good size for the crown. And then that one will be for the lamb head. Yep. Yeah, I like that. Okay. So I just tuck the magnet into the middle there, kind of hold it in place, and then I'm going to just really quick do a little running stitch that's just up and down through the fabric. All the way around the magnet so that it just stays in place where I put it. And my magnet keeps grabbing my needle. Okay, so just real quick and dirty, I've got it now pinned in the fabric there. And I'm going to come over to the lamb itself and then stitch this fabric down so that the magnet is sticking to my nail, is right where that yellow mark is, so it's still centered on the head. And when I'm going through the body here, even though I'm using a black thread, I'm only going through the very back of the fabric, so that thread's not going to show through to the front. Again, this is just really quick and dirty, big stitches. It's just to hold everything in place. This is not going to be visible in the plushie at all. So quality here does not matter so long as it holds things where it has to. There, pull it nice and tight, and then I'm going to just tie it off right here on the other side of the magnet. Just going a couple times through the loop that I'm making there. And there we go. So now we have a magnet on the back of the head, and I can flip this. Like that. There's my lamb face. And now that second magnet that's going to go in the crown will stick right where the crown is going to go. That gets centered right in the base of the crown, so the crown will stick onto the head like that. So one removable crown. This one's crown is just going to be sewn in place right on the back of the head there. So non-removable there. Okay, so now I get to stuff the head, and at the same time I'm going to be stuffing the arms because I need them stuffed before I can put them on the body. So, okay. Oh, I grabbed two of the one side body. Okay, I need one other body piece. Oops. There we go. Okay, so I can stuff actually this, the head, and those. Everybody else gets put out of the way. The horns are ready to stuff and put on right now, but because they don't have a base and I just stitch them on, I don't actually stuff them until I'm actively sewing it onto the head there. The bases, one goes right with the crown, the other one needs the magnet stitched to it, so I'm going to just put that in the back corner because I still have to work on that. Pins go out of the way. Okay, and legs need to be pinned before I can sew them. So this is the way that the fluff is going to look on its head. So I want to make sure that it's this same way. The part that's going to end up visible is actually the underside because we're only looking at the inside fluff right now, and I want that inside fluff to be facing in this direction. So this is actually the back and this is the front of the fluff. So I can cut a little tiny snip in here, and then I'm going to use that to flip the fluff inside out. Okay, so now I have a hole. That's going to be the back, and that's the front of the fluff there. So this gets stuffed, the little arms get stuffed. Flip them. And as soon as I do that, the edges are going to fluff all over, so I'm going to put that over my garbage can-ish. And get rid of some of that fluff. Let's go. Do that with the other hand as well. There we go. Okay, so that one's already stuffed. I'm going to set it aside, but these things right here still need to be stuffed. Fluff on the face again. There we go. Minky leaves fluffs everywhere, and Sherpa the White attracts fluffs. So this is not my favorite combination of fabrics to be working with. It is the reason I have a pet hair roller that I will just periodically go over them and clean them up. And then before I pack them up to actually mail, they get one final lint rollering to get rid of any of the remaining fuzzies on them. Okay, I'm going to do the little guy first, the little head fluff. Because this one doesn't get a lot of fluffing, just enough to give it a little bit of shape there. And there we go. Now that can be hand sewn. There's nothing left on the machine for that. I'll just stitch up the hole and then kind of loop some threads around to give it that shape where it's the three very defined sections there instead of one inchworm looking thing. There we go. Just want to make sure that my fluff is as fluffy as possible before it goes in. This stuff does tend to clump up and like felt together almost, where it just becomes like a solid glob and it isn't nearly as fluffy. It doesn't join with the rest of it and it yeah. It becomes a very hard packed little ball that it's really hard to do anything stuffing with. So there we go. So I just want to make sure it's all nice and loose and it's not hard packed or felted together like that. Small bits of stuffing are always better than big bits. It just keeps it nice and fluffy as you're stuffing it in there. And then I do want to keep the face kind of flat shaped. So as I'm putting it in, I'm kind of squishing it down just so that it doesn't puff out like a round balloon, and it will keep still that square shape. And I want to make sure I get the stuffing into the outer edges first, and then I fill in that center there. Okay. I'm getting a little bit closer to the edges there. There we go. There's that. Okay, so there's the lamb. It's about the same squishiness on both of them. I just want to define the edges here a little bit better with a little bit more fluff. There we go. And then before I sew the entire body onto the head, I will put a little bit more stuffing right there in between. I just don't want it all to fall out right now, so I will leave it as is. And this is actually going to go away. That's not the same stuffing that I use in the arms here. So the arms get a different second type of stuffing here that's a little less clumpy. So these arms are actually going to be sewn into the body so that the stuffing that goes into them can't move. And I'm going to need to be able to put this arm underneath my sewing machine foot, which means if it's really puffy up around the edge that I'm sewing, it's going to be really thick and it's going to be hard to put underneath underneath the foot of my machine. So this stuff doesn't clump as much. So if I shove it all down in the lower 2/3 and leave this part empty, after I stitch it, I can kind of wiggle it around and fill the entire arm back up without it clumping together like it might in the head. Or if I used the clumpy polyfill in the arm there. A little bit more in this arm. Okay, so that arm is now full all the way up to that top that I'm going to sew, but now I'm going to just kind of shove it down in so that now this top section here is completely empty and flat again. So it'll just make it easier for me to sew. Then once it's done, I can like squish the polyfill back up to where it needs to be. A little bit more in there. Okay. Yep, that one's full now as well, and I'm going to squish that down and in. Kind of compact it down in there, just so that now I can sew it. And I don't need the rest of this fluff, so it gets put away. And there we go, there's my arms. Okay. Whoop. So the arms are going to get sewn into the body here. The front and the back of the body are the same, but the arms are just going to be attached to one side. I am going to sew up this V before I do that, just because once the arms are in there, they kind of flop around, and I don't want to have to deal with that later on. Okay, so there we go. So sewing up that V, now it no longer sits flat on the table. I've got that body shape to it. That was basically the same thing that I did with the darts on the heads there. Actually, let me bring those back down. I gotta remember to keep things in frame so it looks interesting even when I'm doing work elsewhere. Okay. I get rid of some of that fluff from the edge there. And now these arms actually get hand sewn in. I did it with pins the first couple of times I made the limbs, but the pins don't hold it in place as well as I'd like. They sometimes still slide up and down, and because this is such a fluffy fabric, it's really hard to pull those stitches out and then fix the arm position. So it's actually worth it to me to take a little extra time to hand sew them in so that I don't have to go and re-sew them afterwards again. And scissors. Okay. And then I just want a really big knot at the end. So what you do is you twist it around your finger a couple of times and then just roll it off your finger, and everything just kind of gets really bad and snarly. Pinch it and pull to the end and you just get a giant wad of thread. There we go. And I've made a little mark on the body where I want the top of the arm to go. So I can just stitch that straight through the top seam here. To connect that where it should go. And then I can put this right up against the edge. I am matching the edges together, and I'm doing what's called a whip stitch, which is where I'm just going over the top with the thread and then back through the front side of the fabric. And being really close to the edge because this is going to be held in with my sewing machine, not just these stitches. So all I really need to do is pin this arm down in place so that it doesn't move anywhere. These are not going to be the permanent stitches for it. And then just like what I did with the magnet, I'm going to go through my loop a couple of times, catch a fuzz. Didn't do that with the magnet. But that will tie the knot that I need. And there we go. then same on this side. I've got my big knot, so I just go through right where the arm begins. Then I'm going to go through that top seam, right where the two pieces connect, right at the top there. Perfect. Tuck in all the fluff, line up the edges, and I'm going to whip stitch back over the top and around. Whoop, to hold this arm in place. And there we go. A couple more knots there. Hold that in place. I always make sure that I have a pin cushion for my needles. I really hate losing needles. When that happens, you basically have to go through everything that you've made to make sure you don't have a needle lost somewhere inside a plushie. So I always make sure that I put my needles back into a pin cushion when I'm done with them, because I've gotten sick and tired of searching lost needles or dropping them on the ground and having to play like the floor is lava to avoid them. So my needles always go back into a pin cushion. And there we go. We've got little arms stuck in place. I'm going to sew up this V now and then come back so that I can sew the front, or I can pin the front and the back together. Okay. So I've got front and back, and I can pin those together. To make the full body. Again, I'm just lining up the centers there. There we go. And then I'm going to just pin the top and the bottom first, and then work my way towards the center, just to make sure everything is even all the way through. The arm being in there tends to want to fight the edge, so you've got to just be extra careful pinning this section right here. Just right there. And then one more right on top of the arm, right at the top corner. Whoop. Okay, and then the other arm gets tucked inside again. Everything gets tucked inside. If it's on the outside, it'll end up inside the plushie. got there. Tuck everything inside. Okay. And that goes there. And there we go. Okay. So everything's now pinned together. I can again take back over to my machine and stitch around the entire outside edge. There are 2 holes for the legs, so I'm going to avoid sewing across those. Then the legs will get pinned to the base. I have to change thread color for that one though, because I don't want white showing through the edges, so I'll be using gray thread. And then those legs actually get hand stitched into the body. I don't do that by machine. I stuff them and then stitch them in like this. So that will bring me to the same point as here, and I can stitch all 4 of the legs together at the same time.